Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the report. I'm Yasmin Khatun and I'll be taking a look at the stories that matter to you, discussing news stories from throughout the week and the ones that you've all been talking about. On the report, we love to hear what you think, and to join the conversation, get tweeting using #TheReport. Later on the programme, we'll be going through the topics that you've all been trending throughout the week. But before we get into the conversation, let's have a quick look at some of the latest news.
The Turkish parliament has voted to extend its mandate, authorizing the deployment of troops in Syria. The government has said the alleged use of chemical weapons by President Bashar al-Assad poses a threat to Turkey. As the fierce battle in Syria continues between rebel factions and government forces, Turkey has come out as one of Assad's fiercest critics, advocating military intervention in Syria and frustrated over what it sees as Western indecisiveness. Japan has today called on the United States to end a partial government shutdown. President Barack Obama cancelled an Asian tour expected to include a meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Obama had planned to depart for a four-nation trip tomorrow. He cancelled visits to Malaysia and the Philippines earlier this week because of his budget struggle in the US. He said he will not attend regional summits in Indonesia and Brunei. Obama was scheduled to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin, Chinese President Xi Jinping, and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, among other leaders at the summits. The political standoff over the US budget has shut down non-essential government services and appears likely to drag on for another week or longer. Another crisis looms in the US. In 2 weeks, lawmakers must decide whether to increase the US government's $16.7 trillion debt borrowing limit. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has urged US President Barack Obama to keep sanctions in place against Iran. Netanyahu was hosted at the White House just 3 days after Obama and new Iranian President Hassan Rouhani spoke by telephone in the highest level contact between the countries in more than 3 decades. The call fueled hopes for a resolution of Iran's decade-old nuclear standoff with the West. Signs of US-Iranian rapprochement have rattled Israel, which accuses Iran of trying to buy time and ease international sanctions so that it can pursue development of nuclear weapons. Iran has denied it is working towards an atomic bomb. Obama said he was ready to test Rouhani's overtures, but would insist on the highest level of verification of Iran curbing its nuclear program, before providing what he called sanctions relief. A Muslim cleric has been shot dead in the Kenyan port of Mombasa, amid high tensions between the Muslim community and the security forces. Ibrahim Rogo Omar and 3 other people were shot as they drove home on yesterday night after preaching. The killing is similar to that of Aboud Rogo Mohammed last year. It comes 2 weeks after the attack on a Kenyan shopping centre, which killed at least 67 people. Somali group Al-Shabaab have claimed to have been behind the attack. Security forces raced to contain deadly violence in Myanmar's Rakhine state on Wednesday. A Muslim woman was slashed to death as Buddhist gangs attacked 3 villages around the Tandai township. President Thein Sein made his first visit to Rakhine since taking office and urged the public not to incite violence. At least 237 people have been killed in the last year, and 192 of those deaths were on the Rakhine state, where stateless Rohingya Muslims have bore the brunt of the attacks. As the International Crimes Tribunal continues in its proceedings, another senior opposition leader and lawmaker has been sentenced to death. Salahuddin Kader Chowdhury, a legislator from the main opposition party, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, was found guilty of torture, rape and genocide during the War for Independence from Pakistan in 1971. The 64-year-old was charged with killing some 200 civilians and collaborating with Pakistan's army to kill and torture unarmed people, as well as other crimes. The proceedings of the court have been denounced by opposition parties and human rights groups across the world, calling the trials politically motivated ahead of elections due by January.
With me to discuss some of those stories is Director of the Khalil Foundation, MushfiqueUddin, and Deputy Editor of blog site 5 Pillarz, Dilwar Hussain. And later on in the programme, campaigner and brother of Talha Ahsan, Hamja Ahsan, will be joining us. Now, Mohammed, I'm going to come straight to you. We've just seen the killing of a scholar in Kenya. Tell me a bit more.
I think it was natural that once the Westgate incident happened that there will be repercussions on the Muslim community in Kenya. Five Pillars actually has a correspondent out there, Mohammed Kahia, on the ground, and he reported...
What's he saying?
But basically what he's saying that ever since the Westgate incident started, there has been anti-Muslim hatred that has kicked off, and basically people are looking at the Muslim community with suspicion. And what happened today with the murder of the scholar is going to increase, and incidents like this will become a norm. And yeah, that's what he's basically...
Well, reports implying that this isn't the first time this has happened. This happened about a year ago as well.
Yeah, so...
Mushfique, we've seen there many news stories. Can I come to you on another story that we saw there in Bangladesh? We've just seen another verdict come through from the Bangladeshi International Crimes Tribunal. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is just an extension of what's been happening since this Awami League government came into power. I think both the people who have been convicted and people in Bangladesh, their concern is that will they actually carry out the hangings or the sentences? And if so, will they do it before the elections or after the elections? Because the Awami League party could use it as a tool to emotionally blackmail people, saying, well, if you don't vote us into power, we can't hang these convicted people. The whole issue around, War Crimes Tribunal and its motivations and stuff. I mean, if people have committed crimes, they should have been tried years ago. And if there is real evidence that can be tested under international standards and in a court of law, then it's fine.
This issue, like many others, have seemed to have made their way across shores. In Britain, Lord Carlisle made a statement saying that he was very, very worried about what was happening with the International Crimes Tribunal. But is anything actually being done by the international community, Dilwar?
Well, the Awami government hasn't allowed the international community to actually make any changes to the International Crimes Tribunal. It's a kangaroo court in effect. And it doesn't abide by any international law or any kind of international standards. So whilst people in Britain are discussing the Crimes Tribunal, I don't think the Bangladeshi government, the Awami-led government, has allowed anyone to actually give their thoughts or opinions in its validity of the actual court.
Another story we saw there was Burma.
Yeah.
It's a topic we discussed last week with a few activists who came onto the programme. Now, the situation there seems to be exacerbating. We saw a first visit by the President to the Rakhine camps.
Yeah.
Is there anything the international community should be doing for Burma? Because that doesn't actually seem to be at the head of any broadsheets.
It's quite a sad situation. I think the issue with the Muslims and the Rohingya Muslims in Burma is actually a forgotten case. Whilst people are too consumed with Syria and etc., the people of Burma have been forgotten. But personally, I think it is an onus upon the Bangladeshi government to do something to help the people of Burma. But Sheikh Hasina has come out and outright refused to help the Muslims of Burma. So yeah, whilst the international community can be doing more, I've always been an advocate that neighbouring countries, especially neighbouring Muslim countries, should be giving help, providing help, where Sheikh Hasina has cowardly failed to do that.
Well, very briefly, you did mention Syria there.
Yeah.
We saw some developments. We saw Turkey renew their pledge and commitment to send troops if anybody should take something on. Is Turkey alone in this?
Turkey's position is an interesting one. A lot of people are frustrated that Turkey hasn't done more, especially from the Muslim community. And then I think Turkey's got to also balance out. It is a member of NATO, so Turkey can't really go into anything without asking, the other NATO members. And I think geostrategically that the Syrians want the Turks in there because they really want to make a mess of this, because that's probably their last straw for survival. If they lose their chemical weapons, and they're already talking about a ceasefire or whatever, which means they're on the back foot. And if Turkey, and I think Turkey's been really smart in the sense that it's not been drawn into something because Iran wants to get in. But it's just two ways of looking at it. There's people who say Turkey hasn't done enough, and those who are saying that, look, maybe Turkey just needs to observe and keep the pressure up. The Syrians need to know that the Turks will go in if they really start doing,
Well, Turkey was a country where veils and certain things did come under pressure for a lot of time. I know there are some changes taking place. I did actually want to move on to a headline I saw in the papers earlier this week. I was speaking to both just about this, but it was regarding a bearded young schoolboy who wasn't allowed to continue in his studies. Now, to both of you, I want to get into, but Mushfiq, you're a teacher. You direct the Khalil Foundation, which is a massive school, college, you teach children from all ages up to young adults and older adults in actuality. But how does that make you feel when you hear things like that?
It doesn't surprise me, but it's obviously of great concern. I think the anti-Islamic, Islamophobia, as it were, but real Islamophobia in its ugly colours is coming out. And we're going to get more of it. Sadly, Woolwich didn't help. In terms of education and institutionally, schools, the whole issue about children wearing niqab in school, this particular one, I think there are going to be those who are going to just test the waters to see how the British community, a wider community reacts, because we live in a country where we believe in these values. We believe in freedom of expression.
Does it make a difference that the school was a Catholic school? Now, the parents
it makes a lot of difference.
The parents did know that when they sent the child to the school. Does that have any implications?
I think it makes a lot of difference, because I think, Muslims, we have to understand that Catholics have been persecuted in this country, Jews have been persecuted in this country, and they've dealt with these issues quite successfully. Now, we can't pretend to either sit in isolation or try to deal with these things in isolation. This Catholic school has a diocese, has a senior head, a priest. Rather than us making protests and just sort of complaining as victims, we've got to strategically look at these things. I mean, Jewish children have beards. Nobody says they can't go to class, and it's a religious school.
Dilwar?
Faith school.
In regards to it being a Roman Catholic school, I think these issues, it's a matter of it being a local catchment school. So I don't think Muslim parents necessarily send their children to these schools thinking it's a Roman Catholic school. It's an issue of the local catchment area. But in regards to the beard and the boys they were given a choice, either shave the beard or you remain in isolation.
I actually have the statement from the head teacher here where he says, I'm fully aware of the sensitive nature of this issue and I've done my very best to understand and deal with it in a reasonable fashion.
Okay, well,
how does that sound? Well,
he also said in another statement that he read the Quran, and nowhere in the Quran does it stipulate that men should have a beard, but you need to appreciate that if that's the opinion that these boys follow, and they follow the opinion that it can't be shaved, then they have to respect that, because they're being discriminated against on religious grounds. And to be kept in isolation for 6.5 hours for nearly a month, it's a very sad situation.
I think you were coming to this, Mushfiq, but being a religious school, should that not imply further understanding of religious principles?
It's not just that. There's the issue of these two boys in a state school, because at the end of the day, it's a state-funded school. But just this morning, I got a call because the whole anti-Muslim education. We read last week that Michael Gove's appointed spies or ex-MI5 agents to spy on Muslim school governors. People, Muslims get into the education system. This morning, a Muslim girls' secondary school, they were Ofsted inspected 2 weeks ago. Literally 2 weeks ago, less than a fortnight ago. Ofsted turned up this morning, we've got concerns about the uniform policy. So unless we collectively do something about this, and collectively in all fronts, so if there's an association of Muslim schools, if it doesn't have teeth, give it teeth. If not, replace it with something that has teeth, that collectively represents Muslim schools. And then politically, rather than Muslims making points in isolation, talk to the political parties. We're here, we're Muslims, we're part of British society, we're not going anywhere. This is our way of life. You either accept your complete values and accept us part of it, or you tell us straight that we can't tolerate you, and then Muslims can decide whether this country is fit for purpose for them or not. It's a really...
I'll very, very briefly take something from you, Dilwar, but this does seem to be a continuing and very brewing discussion, actually. Dilwar.
I'll definitely reinforce that we shouldn't look at these matters in an isolated manner. We have to look at the wider narrative. And whilst I agree with what you said, that we should have a collective voice in countering this, I'm not necessarily a big advocate of the fact that we should lobby our MPs, because similar MPs will also speak about the hijab ban in Parliament.
We did see that in the past weeks.